Hey guys, this is Mr. Reed again. We're going to be going over Unit 4 today in the blueprint book. Now, the whole reason you bought this book is pretty much Units 4 and 10. 4 talks about dimensions, and there are several different types. Unit 10 goes over welding symbols and what you'll find on those. So those are your two most critical units to learn. And since this is so important and has so much content, I'm going to break this up into probably 3 different parts. But to start with, Unit 4 is all about dimensions. Generally, dimensions come in 2 different forms. You've got linear dimensions, which is measurements given for a straight line. Linear dimensions are given in fractions or decimals. An example of that would be 12.5 inches or 12.5 inches. Angular dimensions, that's pretty obvious. You know, anytime you have an angle, let's say your bevel. Let's say you want a 37.5 degree bevel. And that's going to be expressed in degrees. So angular dimensions are expressed in degrees. Linear dimensions are generally given to you in fractions or decimals or mixed numbers. And I have here note that when dimensions are expressed in decimal form, it indicates the importance of precision. And further proof of that will be a little bit later, probably in part 2 when we go over tolerance and what that means. Now, a couple of terms you need to be aware of. The first one, you know, of course you have linear and angular, but then you've got a bevel. When only one member of a joint has an angular dimension, it's called a bevel. Sometimes you'll find later on when you get into groove symbols, you have a single bevel groove. Now, when you have 2 bevels that come together, that creates your V groove, which is your test plates. You guys have probably progressed far enough to experience that yourselves. So a single bevel groove is when you have a flat edge and then you have a bevel going to it. So that's a bevel groove. Again, bevel. Now, when you have that V groove, a lot of times on a drawing, those 2 dimensions that come together and create that V shape, this will have a dimension and the other joint will have a dimension. And generally a true bevel is 37.5 degrees. So if you have 37.5 degrees here and another 37.5 degree to complete your V groove, a lot of the times on a drawing these are expressed together. These 2 angular dimensions are combined and they are known as the included angle. So if you have 2 37.5 degree pieces, 2 of those, if you add 37.5 to 37.5, you have a 75 degree included angle. Another thing I want to bring your attention to, land. Land is it's pretty much slang, but everybody I've been associated with in the field in my career always calls it a land. But another word for that is root face. And that is when you create a bevel groove. If you remember when you were welding with a 6010, you had a 1/8 root face or land. So that is where that term comes from. Now a feathered edge is when there is no land. And generally you'll have that. I have here an example of that is your TIG test plates. That's when no flat surface is necessary on a test plate. They're just sharp, real sharp edges. And that way it breaks down faster. And like I say, that's what you'll be doing for your TIG test plates. So when there's no bevel or, no root face or land, it's known as a feathered edge. And these are a couple key terms that we're learning right here in part 1. If you guys have any questions, please write them down and contact your instructor. And here in a second we'll be moving on to part 2 of Unit 4. Thanks.